The identity crisis regarding the African American has been going on for centuries within this country. What are the people so confused about in regards to the African American? What's the facts about our identity? So let's take a look at some history and some facts in relation to the African American. African American. Well, we first must understand the history of this terminology and its origins, okay? The term Africa came from a white European Roman general in 146 BC by the name of Leo Scipio Africanus. Leo Scipio Africanus fought in the Punic War battles over in the Mediterranean against Hannibal. He fought and won the second Punic War battle against Hannibal Barcus, okay? It was called the Battle of Zama at the time. What happens is the conquering Roman general gets to name the conquering region after itself, which was at that time called the Carthage. And it's supposed to be named Africanus Proconsularis. Now the entire continent is named after the invaders. History records also show that there is a celebrating of the providence of Africa with its first coinage in 136 AD of a European emperor by the name of Hadrian. So the ancient name of Africa was called Al-Kebalan, meaning mother of mankind, Garden of Eden, and it was used by many of the indigenous natives like the Nubians, the Moors, the Egyptians, etc. So Al-Kebalan is the oldest word of indigenous origins, okay? Why is that important? Because it traces back to the original people, all right? So the term Africa, A-F-R-U-I-K-A, came from the Metu Neter, and it was used by the Egyptians and also referred to it as the motherland. So Africa is the landmass, okay? But the region is occupied by tribes, and they use their indigenous tribal identities to identify, or their names to identify. So when we look back at some of the oldest empires of the East called Taiwi or Taimuri, okay? And sometimes we refer to these particular empires as the empire of Nubia, Egypt, Ethiopia, ancient Africa. So we can find variations of Taimuri used in some of the oldest glyphs of the East and the West. In regards to America, the name America is named after a European explorer by the name of Amerigo, okay? The ancient name for America was called Turtle Island or the West Indies. And over in South America, it was also known as Abiyala, meaning land of maturity, land of vital blood, or land of blood. So if you look at the connections or the continents, it is European colonization that is renaming locations of indigenous people. So African American is a misnomer. Furthermore, let me just connect you via Pangea 250 million years ago when the continents was all together. So you have indigenous people from all over the continent doing trade, commerce, marriages, etc., all over this continent prior to colonization via slavery. Thoughts about the African American? Well, when we think about the African American in America in regards to the adversity of this group of people in America, what happens? We think of slavery, right? That's because of colonization. It's about who gets to tell the story. See, slavery is a term used for what we call legally sanctioned institutions, okay? What does that mean? Well, prior to 1865, slavery was legal in America and it was carried out upon property, 3/5 persons. And started out in the early 1500s by foreigners who came onto the soil and began to colonize the indigenous people. See, slavery means holding another group against their will of freedom and inflicting trauma upon that particular group. Now, what does this look like historically? Well, it looks like genocide. So genocide is the deliberate and systematic destruction of a racial, ethnical, religious, or national group. So what does this look like in detail? Well, it's killing members of the group, causing seriously bodily mental harm to members of that particular group, inflicting conditions of life that would bring about their physical destruction. So this is also what we call transferring children to groups to another group. So all of these types of acts is genocide. This is also caused what we call denationalization, okay? Denationalization is the act of stripping a national group of their nationality via political identities. How is this done? This is done through agencies and their agents via political bodies, which are governments, okay? Now, as this information is exposed as far as denationalization and genocide, this is a total violation of our international rights, our human rights, our natural rights, and our political rights. What am I saying? I'm saying that slavery is really denationalization and genocide. Let me add this. We no longer identify under our tribal clan names, which we were prior to colonization. Now we are misnomers: African, African American, Negro, Black, Indian, colored, etc. We have lost our knowledge of political science. I'm gonna say that again. We have lost our knowledge of political science. According to Dr. Wellmont Blyden, he said nationality is the ordinance of nature and everyone longs for a distinct and separate nationality. He was speaking of the Negro race, okay? Nationality means to belong to a nation, body politic, affording the ones the protection and guarantee, securities, natural and political rights retained by that particular group. In detail, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15 states, everyone has a right to a nationality, and that no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. Nationality is self-identification. It is your political status in law. For an example, if I was to ask, what is your nationality? And you was to tell me, for an example, Nigeria, or Nigerian. And I was to say, where are you from? And you say Nigeria. Okay, and then I would say, what landmass is that from? Or what country or continent? They would say, Africa. Well, you identified your political status, your body politic, the landmass in that order, okay? The same if I was to say that I'm Dominican, Haitian, Jamaican, Ethiopian, Australian, Seminole, Tasmanian, etc., which are all nationalities of Black people, okay? We in America say that our nationality is Black, African American, as though this is a nationality, and it's not. We are all Black people across this continent. Black is complexion, it's skin tone, it is melanin, it is phenotype, pigmentation. It gives you your color. You can say brown, you can say almond, cocoa brown, whatever. We are identified as misnomers here. A misnomer is a wrong name or an inaccurate label or a term. It's a fiction. It's a name given by another. So the word indigenous is a term for unity for the Aboriginal people, because it gives us the opportunity to self-identify, and we get to tell the world who we are. In 1989, the Dawes rolls kept records of ethnical backgrounds in order to determine one's association with a particular tribe. In 1902, the government created a Freedmen's list to rule out all of the copper-colored natives of land allotments. According to the 1900 census, all natives who had or looked like they had Negro features were labeled as Black, colored, mulatto, etc. So the term African American became endorsed in 1989 by Jesse Jackson, Ramona Ellen, with the help of the African American Summit, as they were trying to gain political power from the people for their political elections. Here's a quote by Jesse Jackson. He says, "Just as we were called colored, but we're not that, and then Negro, but not that. To be called Black is just as baseless. Black tells you about skin color and what side of town you live on. African American evokes discussion of the world. Every ethnical group in this country has a reference to some land base, some historical, cultural base." So this is where you get the term African American. It was endorsed in 1989. Prior to that, no African American terminology was labeled on the indigenous people here. It was Negro, colored, etc. So it appears that he was trying to connect us through ancestral lineage by combining African and American. So with a little knowledge of maybe his history and a little knowledge of self. According to Chief Edwin, a Warhouse Galloom chief of the Choctaw Nation from Lacombe, Louisiana, they spell Choctaw as C-H-A-H-T-A, and she speaks of us being indigenous to this land here, and the Europeans stealing their identity as Choctaw and taking it back to Oklahoma. The Europeans spelled it as C-H-O-C-T-A-W, and she also speaks of the Dancing Rabbit Treaty that was not signed by her ancestors, but it was signed by foreigners imposing as them. So there's also historical records of her tribe that could be found at the St. Louis Cathedral of their indigenous origins here in the Americas. Are we indigenous? Well, let's take a look at what the records show, okay? There was an Italian explorer by the name of Giovanni di Verrazzano, okay? He was the first European explorer of the Atlantic coast under the service of the French crown. So in 1524, he gave a description of the natives of the east coast of North America. And he said that some of them were garlands of bird feathers. They are dark in color, but not unlike the Ethiopian, with thick black hair, not very long, tied back behind their heads like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they are well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we are. They have broad chests and strong arms and legs, and other parts of their body is well composed. So to get further information on this particular research and translation, you can research the translation by Susan Terrell. Furthermore, William Penn also made mention of his interface with the Aboriginal clans, which you can find in the 1683 report to the Free Society of Traders. Furthermore, Indian, defined in the Black's Law Dictionary, says that Indian is the Aboriginal inhabitants of North America. Also, too, under the body of law, Corpus Juris Secundum 42 CJS, it says Indian is the name given by European discoverers of America to its Aboriginal inhabitants. When used in the statute without any other limitation, the term has been said to include members of the Aboriginal race, whether now sustaining tribal relations or otherwise. So you don't have to be a member of a tribe recognized by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to be an Aboriginal or Indigenous. See, Indian, again, is a misnomer. It's a word given by another group of people. So in references, according to John Henry Clark in his book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, he refers to the people of the Caribbean island as indigenous. So during 1492, when Christopher Columbus stepped foot on the Caribbean island, he was met by the native Arawak Americans, okay? According to Christopher Columbus' journals, he wrote about the inhabitants of the Arawak Haitians. Also, in reference, there is a man by the name of Father Roman, a Catholic missionary. He recorded that the black tribes came from the south and landed in Haiti, and they referred to those groups as the Black Guyanese. Resources of the Negro presence in America from these scholars, professors, and historians. You have Professor Lee Weiner, African and the Discovery of America. Harold G. Lawrence, African Explorers to the New World. Ivan Van Sertima, They Came Before Columbus. Dr. Ali Muhammad, The Lost Aboriginal Heritage of the So-Called Negro African American. So now you get an abundance of information to do some basic researches on North America and the connections that we have in this country.
Oldest Homo sapiens ever found on this land are from Brazil. The name that the archaeologists and anthropologists gave to the skeleton is Lucia, L-U-C-I-A. All right. Dr. Richard Neve of the University of Manchester did craniological studies on this entity and did a reproduction of the model of what Lucia would look like, and based on craniological studies, which is phenotype, he declared that she was anthropologically Negro. Period. I'm not even going to some of the other things that we could quote and highlight. I did that lecture on Sign of the TV when I did Indigenous Science versus Evolution. But my question to Henry Louis Gates is this. If you're going to measure the DNA of Native Americans, why don't you go get a sample from Lucia and get family tree DNA to get their archaeogenomic scientists to use that set of DNA to measure it up against all the people that you tested? Morgan Freeman, all right, Oprah, all these people that you tested. Take her set of genes and match it up against it. You are taking the Austronesian DNA of these pale groups, measuring it against ours and telling us we're not Native American. That was a part of the plot from the beginning.
Facts and history. Well, let's connect the African ancestry to the Indigenous Americans. First, we must understand the nations who are on record admitting their participation in what we call the Atlantic slave trade. You have Great Britain, you have France, you have Germany, you have Portugal, you have the Pau Arabs, you have the Mongoloid Native Americans, and you have the West African kings, like from the kingdom of Waida, which is currently called Beni. You have the kingdom of Dahomey, the kingdom of Oyo, the kingdom of Angola, and the kingdom of the Congo, all enslaving indigenous West Africans and indigenous Americans who had shared in what we call traditions, culture, marriage, etc., all in the Americas. Now we must follow the treaties, okay? We have the Treaty of Marrakesh in 1786. We have the Treaty of Arrancas in 1780. We have the Treaty of 1778 with the Powhatan, the Delaware, also known as the Lenape, okay, which was supposed to govern all of the southern native tribes, like the tribes, the Shawnee, the Yamasee, etc. And they were supposed to have representation in Congress to represent those tribes. And then you have the Treaty of 1866 with the Cherokee and the Choctaw, as well as the constitutional treaty clauses concerning international law. It is on record that our ancestors were called freedmen, indentured servants, slaves, 3/5 persons, who had indigenous tribal lineage. It is also on record that the Saracens, aka Berbers or Moors of West Africa, were at war with the Christian polities and later enslaved. It is also on record that the civilization in the Americas, the oldest civilization, was called the Olmec, which is a misnomer. The original name is called the She. There are many tribes on this land, and we as Aboriginal indigenous people have a right to our autonomy through self-identification, and we have the rights by blood and rights by the soil, which is just solely and just sanguineous. On August 30th of 2017, a senior U.S. federal judge by the name of Thomas Hogan, he ruled in favor of the Cherokee freedmen who were fighting for their rights as Cherokees. He granted them full rights and citizenship to the Cherokee Nation due to the 1866 treaty, which is supreme law of the land. African Americans who are citizens of the United States are 14th Amendment citizens, subject citizens through the African Nationalization Act of 1870. So we are citizens under the colonizer of our ancestors, not free people. The original 13th Amendment 20 section states that anyone of African descent cannot be citizens of the United States. It had to be amended. Our ancestors fought in the Civil War, okay? We're supposed to have over 160 acres in the land in the state for us to have self-determination. We never got that. The 14th Amendment came. And tribes that we were supposed to be a part of puts us out of citizenship and did not grant us the rights to do so, to be a part. The government created a separate freedmen's list that was designed to rule out all the copper-colored natives, and it allowed all of the Europeans on the Dawes rolls commissioned by paying $5. After the government already listed full-blooded Indians or indigenous Aboriginals as black or colored, and it was documented in the 1900 census. So from the 1880s on to 1902, there was a published notice given, and it was given in detail of other claimants that now can legally make their cases for freedmen and enrollments, okay? This allowed all the white citizens the rights to seize the natives' lands and reparations, and also to involve themselves into the Indian treaties. We as Aboriginal indigenous people have a right to our autonomy through self-identification. And now that we are returning back to our origins within our tribes and self-determination, I am an Aboriginal American of Moorish descent. What am I saying? I have a nationality as a Native American within my indigenous tribe, legal and lawful remedy. In detail, Aboriginal or Aborigines, inhabiting or existing in the land from the earliest time before the arrival of colonists. Indigenous, originating or occurring naturally in a particular place. Native, a person born in a specific place.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. You never find a white Aborigine. Aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are Aborigines, but you don't like to be called an Aborigine.